Hey, everybody. I'm here today with conversation number 48 with Ted Frank, Esquire, a practicing attorney, I believe. Ted, you still practicing attorney?
Oh,
Oh,
absolutely. I
okay.
just
And
wanted
then
to.
I'm here with Josiah Neely, a non-practicing attorney,
Yes, that's
a
right.
lapsed attorney, right?
Is
I
that
I
because you're a non-attorney or non-practicing?
no,
Non-practicing.
I am an attorney. I practiced for I did constitutional law and appellate litigation for a number of years before moving into the nonprofit sector. And according to the Texas Bar, I'm on inactive status, which is true. I'm not doing any cases right now, so I don't have to pay them. Um, but yeah, no, Ted is not. He's not just a lawyer. I think he's one of those super lawyers or whatnot. I don't know.
I
I
think
don't
that's
know
a
exactly.
trademark term. I'm not sure I can take credit
Yeah,
for
actually, so listeners, viewers, obviously we know Ted Frank. Actually, Ted, you've been on my radar since like before 2010. We have mutuals, Walter Olson, friend of
Right,
mine,
right.
that I've known for a while. So, I think when you first got on my radar, I couldn't see as much of your forehead. Things have changed, but I just remember your first headshot that I saw, which I believe was in 2008. You had a quite substantial thatch of dark hair. I think
I think my 2008 headshot was completely shaved,
was it okay? But I think I might have seen an older one somewhere online
but yeah, in the
when
early
I was googling you.
2000s,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
my first
Um,
C-SPAN appearances, full of hair.
Yeah, that could be what it is. That could be what it is. I mean, it was obviously, suit and tie, the usual. You're always, dressed to the nines. But okay,
I'm an ugly man. I
so
need all the help I can get. Right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah, you got it, you got it. Well, be who you want to be through presentation. That's a thing. Josiah, you should look into that. No, maybe you already are who you want to be, Josiah.
That's right. Yeah, to dress for the job you want, which is why I'm wearing a
I mean,
t-shirt with
you,
a
you gotta
T-Rex
say,
holding a Glock.
you got,
That's
you gotta say, the listeners and the viewers, we don't need to do our pronouns and talk about our sexuality. Like they know we're straight men, because I'm starting out by like making comments about appearance and
hmm
like sartorial presentation.
right.
This is our way. Like when you see a bunch of straight men hanging out, complimenting each other and like telling each other that they're tens, be
I
very, very
didn't call
suspicious
anybody.
what's going on there. You
I haven't
know?
called anybody a 10, so I don't. No offense, no offense, but I
I
didn't do.
I know, boy, like, you are looking good today. No,
Right, good, good.
like
Uh, all right, we're changing. We're moving on. We're moving on. All right, so we're going to talk in a little bit about Epstein and all of that, but before that, I did want you do have you're prolific ex poster, um, but you do also have a day job as a attorney, and I think it is Hamilton Legal. Is that it's Hamilton Legal,
Hamilton Lincoln Law Institute,
Hamilton
sort
Lincoln
of
Law
forced on
Institute.
us by what acronyms are available as domain names.
Yes, that's right. And so I classically knew you as the class action guy who would go in and object to these class action settlements where the lawyers get, 70 gazillion dollars and the supposed plaintiffs get a 35-cent coupon or something. And I guess you still do that, but you've also branched out into other areas like free speech, DEI, other stuff like that. So maybe you want to just explain a little bit about what Hamilton Lincoln, what you guys do, and how
Sure, we're a public interest law firm. We still do a lot of the class action stuff. We actually won two big class action cases last week in the Second and Seventh Circuits. Uh, the Seventh Circuit one was especially nice because it was I argued it, and I think I haven't been able to find a counterexample. That it's the first time an attorney with a heart transplant has won a federal appellate oral argument.
Mm,
But we have branched out. I'm very excited about our litigation over civil terrorism, uh,
mhm.
the act of NGOs going out and trying to disrupt society, ostensibly on behalf of some cause or the other, but just generally as a disruptive force. So we've sued Jewish Voice for Peace and the Tides Foundation and a variety of pro-Hamas organizations over road blockades in Washington, D.C. and Chicago, Illinois, and we've brought those as class actions. Uh, and they're pending in federal district court now.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I think like most people, you've probably seen, those videos online of people are blocking traffic and the passengers are out and say, "Hey, I need to get to work. I have to go to the doctor's appointment or whatever." Very annoying, whatever the cause may be. I hope you said you filed a class action. I hope you're not planning on just getting a big settlement for yourself, and having
no,
yeah,
boy, we would attract a lot of abuse if we did that. But and also, I have the sense that a lot of these organizations are going to go down fighting rather than settle. But
probably, yeah.
we will we will see how that plays out.
Yeah, and then another thing, uh, at the height of the Great Awakening and afterwards, after 2020, y- when there were there's been a intra debate on the right about civil rights law and things like that. I think Christopher Caldwell kind of wrote a book urging repeal of the Civil Rights Act and this and that. And I'd always thought, well, actually, what is really necessary is not to get rid of the Civil Rights Act, which seems like a political non-starter, whatever you think about that, but just actually enforce it in a race neutral way, especially after 2020, when you had all these really explicitly anti-white, sometimes anti-Asian, or you know, racially, ideological work requirements, diversity statements, other things like this. It seemed like there was just a big opportunity for someone to come in and litigate that if you could find plaintiffs and someone was willing to do it. And I was a little chagrined for a while that no one seemed to be doing this. And so I know that some of your cases have kind of involved in that. And I think this is maybe uh, one of the great things about having your own shop is that if you see opportunity like this, you can just say, "Hey, let's do it." But you're doing those cases too, right?
Right. We represent the National Association of Scholars in a couple of cases over DEI requirements in federal grant programs, and we have a couple of those cases pending. Uh, one in Texas and one in New York, where New York is sued to sort of reinstate DEI that the Trump administration had struck down. And but so and we represented, and unfortunately we got a very nice settlement for our clients, but it was confidential, so I can't say which top law school he or she settled with, but that was another reverse discrimination case, or just discrimination case, as the case may be. But
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's I've always the phrase reverse discrimination has always sort of rankled me because it's the same thing. It's not it's not like the student discriminated against the college and so the college is now discriminating against the student. This It's not the way it works. And then the final area that I'm familiar with, maybe I'm missing something, but I know uh I know you've done some cases about like I mean, the proponents of the law, I think, would describe it as the deep fakes or,
right.
restricting AI, misleading AI generated stuff. But some of the, I think, classic examples are it's clearly parody, where you use AI so that, Joe Biden comes out and, he just says, I was going to say something scatological, but like something that
Right.
any person with above room temperature IQ would realize is a joke, right? But
Yeah. So one of the interesting things about First Amendment litigation is often the government will try to avoid reaching the merits of it by saying, "Oh, your client doesn't actually have to worry about being prosecuted, so they don't have standing to challenge this in federal courts because it doesn't actually affect them." And we had a very frustrating experience with a Pennsylvania law where uh, we challenged a very bad Pennsylvania disciplinary rule that very explicitly said, this is meant to cabin speech against minorities, but it's okay to have discriminatory speech if it's in the name of promoting diversity. And it was very clearly going to be used to sort of shut down right wing speech and not left wing speech. And they did amend the rule, but then they had one of their officials say, "Oh, we would never prosecute your client's speech." And well, you waited until we got the injunction to say that, and
right, yeah,
and you can't moot the case retroactively. And besides, your board turns over every year, and who knows what the next board's going to do. The rule's still on the books, but the Third Circuit said we didn't have standing to do it. And but boy, Pennsylvania needs to be careful.
yeah,
So it's sort of a win because Pennsylvania is sort of on notice that they can't use they've narrowed the rules somewhat, and they're on notice that they can't use it in a politically discriminatory way.
yeah,
But with the deepfake law, it was much more interesting because what happened was Elon Musk uh, retweeted our client's parody video of Vice President Harris, uh, and it was boy, just a nice. It was hilarious. It was because it mixed her actual speech in with whatever the video was saying, and it wasn't even clear that her actual speech wasn't funnier than what the video was saying, uh, but this upset Gavin Newsom very much, and he says, "Boy, we're going to pass a law to make this illegal." And when the governor of the state of California says, "I am targeting your client for his video," um, boy, nobody can say we don't have standing. You passed this law and you took out the clause that said it doesn't cover parody, exactly so that you could reach our client. Uh, so we won a preliminary injunction on that very early on, and the state has agreed not to enforce it while everything's pending. And cross motions for summary judgment. Uh, X has joined the suit. The Babylon Bee has joined the suit. Uh, and we have cross motions for summary judgment pending, and will get argued in Sacramento in August.
yeah. I remember, I used to practice law many years ago, and one time I was arguing a case in the Seventh Circuit, and Judge Easterbrook was on the panel, and he is sort of famous for being a little rough sometimes with the advocates, and so he was kind of ripping me to shreds, saying, "Well, look, you don't have standing because there's no way, we're doing a constitutional challenge to this law, and there's no way that they would ever apply it against your client in these circumstances that you're alleging he wants to do or whatnot." And so he beat me up pretty badly, and then I sat down, and the other side got up, and they basically said, "Oh yeah, we would prosecute," So sometimes,
Did,
sometimes
did,
you just gotta know how
did
to
he
keep
do
your mouth shut.
the? I mean, I could see him doing this.
Yes,
It's the
yes,
kind of
yes,
thing
yeah.
he would
He
actually
basically,
do on the bench.
that's right.
I clerked for him, and that was just such an educational year. But
I'm
he
sure,
is
yeah.
not.
He's a brilliant
I
man, but he's not. Uh, people have different virtues, and he doesn't let you if he didn't hesitate to let you know what he thinks about you and your argument, and so on and so forth. So that's
No,
fine.
he is.
Part of the
And when I get up to argue in front of him, he'll try to stump me. It's
That's right. All right. Well, Razib, do you have anything you'd like to add on any of this before we start talking about?
No, I mean, you guys are as I say, this was all legalese to me.
All right, so all of this is at hlli.org, and you can find all our cases there, and
Yes.
our docket's really fun because, like you say, we get to pick and choose our own cases, and we try to pick the fun ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great organization. It's a good mix of cases. The class action work I think is very socially valuable, but doesn't get a lot of attention. And hopefully, some of these other issues are a little more salient. And but I'm sure it's a blast doing the whole thing. Okay, so let's talk about Jeff Epstein, New York financier. The so for years now, there's been all sorts of talk about Jeffrey Epstein and did he kill himself, and who does he have dirt on, and not totally on the right, but lots of right wing people, MAGA people or whatnot, were saying when Trump gets in there, he's gonna release the Epstein files, release the Epstein's client list, so on and so forth. And there wasn't a lot of I didn't see a lot of pushback on this from the right at the time, with a couple of exceptions, you being one of people saying, actually, I don't think that there's much there. And then, of course, last week, they released the DOJ FBI released a memo saying, you know, there's no client list, there's no evidence that warrants prosecution of anybody else besides Epstein's I guess ex-girlfriend, since he's dead, and Epstein himself, who you can't prosecute because he's dead. And by the way, he killed himself, et cetera, et cetera. So you know this has been, I mean, it's been interesting watching things play out. I still have some questions about the whole thing that are not fully resolved in my mind, but um, I thought it would be good to have you on here, since you were a famous conspiracy skeptic on a lot of this stuff, even when it wasn't quite as popular as it is now. So what there's a lot. It's a big topic. So I like what is your, I guess, what's your overall like assessment of the whole thing? Like, what do you think really happened with Epstein? Like, how would you sum up what the actual there is?
Sure. I mean, back in January, I predicted that uh, this whole investigation would not turn up anything new in the way of prosecutions, that everybody who could have been prosecuted has been prosecuted. And, if you wanted to make the rubble bounce, you could go after some of his victims for helping to recruit other victims. But um, eh, what you had was a very wealthy man who had a perversion and then spent a lot of money fulfilling that perversion in terms of recruiting women in a very narrow age range of 15 to 17, sometimes as young as 14, allegedly. Um, uh, Getting naked massages and other sexual activity from them and paying them and getting them to recruit other women to do that. And having a bevy of assistants helping him maintain all of this. And then apparently also videotaping his escapades for self gratification later. And this was somebody who was already dating and hanging out with models and pretending to be a Victoria's Secret scout agent to recruit other models. And in the last few years, the Wall Street Journal has found other examples of him sort of recruiting 20-something models from Eastern Europe to try to uh, groomed them as sex partners, and sometimes being disappointed when they thought they were actually there to go to modeling school and not being able to do anything about it. Um, but this was also a man who has a very unconventional resume. Uh, Came up in the 70s when it was possible for a college dropout to say, "Hey, I'm smart at math and science. Why don't you have me teach math and science at one of the top high schools in New York City?" And he would get hired, and then go to one of his students who's the son of the head of Bear Stearns and say, "Hey, introduce me to your father," and then use that to get a job at Bear Stearns, and then work his way up to a lucrative role within Bear Stearns, and from there um, do some sort of financial shenanigans for 10 years until he hooks on with Les Wexner, and there are some sort of shenanigans that had Wexner paying him tens of millions of dollars, and according to Wexner, overpaying him by tens of millions of dollars. And the conspiracy theory is, well, he could only be making that money through some sort of blackmail scheme. But who is he blackmailing if he's not blackmailing Les Wexner? And Les Wexner publicly goes out and says Epstein is ripping me off and I'm firing him, which is not really consistent with a theory that he's got this sort of Damocles over him, fearful of what Epstein might reveal about his life. And I just always thought the conspiracy theory that he's out there acting as a concierge for a larger group of people uh, to 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 have illicit sex with teenagers, or was blackmailing people, or had a blackmail ring, just wasn't supported by evidence. And part of that was the victims were very well represented by lawyers who had every incentive to uh, not just uncover a real uh, ring of pedophiles, but a fictional ring of pedophiles, because uh, all you need to do is persuade a jury of civil liability, and that's not beyond a reasonable doubt. And so they don't have that burden. But Epstein was hanging out with a lot of wealthy people. Uh, he used his money very effectively in terms of philanthropic contributions to sort of create a network of people who would visit him at his townhouse or at his ranch or at his island or in Florida. And he'd have dinner parties that were well attended by academics and use that to recruit other wealthy people to be at these things also, or celebrities or otherwise. So he uses his private jet to fly Bill Clinton to Africa, and then uses his association with Bill Clinton to plant press stories about what a wonderful money manager he is. Um, and but you had this law firm that was successfully recovering maybe $1 billion for these victims, suing not just Epstein and not just his estate, but uh, very remotely uh, implicated organizations with deep pockets. So, for example, J.P. Morgan Chase paid hundreds of millions of dollars for the entire sin of letting Jeffrey Epstein have banking accounts there. The theory being, well, if you had done your due diligence, you would have seen that he was using his money for illicit purposes and you would have debanked him. And because you didn't debank him, he was able to use his money to commit these horrific acts, and therefore you're liable. And JP Morgan Chase doesn't want to go to trial in front of a New York jury, the same New York juries that are voting for Mamdani to be their next mayor, to test their punitive liability for letting Jeffrey Epstein have a banking account under this theory. Uh, and if they're willing to go after uh, after J.P. Morgan Chase? Why aren't they suing Bill Clinton? Why aren't they suing all the world leaders who are allegedly involved? Why aren't they suing the CIA if they're running this as an operation? They did sue the FBI for not doing more to investigate Epstein. And that is a long shot in terms of liability, just because of governmental immunity and the lack of a duty to enforce the law. And all of this is well established, but they're suing the FBI. So why aren't they suing the CIA if the CIA is running this? Why aren't they suing all these other rich millionaires who are supposedly using the island as a pedophilic playground? And the natural conclusion is there's just no there, that you have one victim out of hundreds who's telling a story completely inconsistent with all the other victims. All the other victims are saying, Maxwell came to me and recruited me and just told me I just had to give naked massages for a few $100s and I get paid a few $100s, and then it turned into something more, and they got more and more sexually intense. And I felt groomed, but I recruited my friends to do the same thing because we wanted the money. And nobody is saying Epstein paid me $15,000 so I could get raped by Prince Philip. Nobody is saying Epstein made me have sex with Marvin Minsky. Nobody is saying I got trafficked to dozens of world leaders, except for one victim who, with as many victims as there were, and um, with as many victims as there were, and the fact that they were targeting, sort of juvenile delinquent teenagers or teenagers who were troubled. Not all of the victims fit that profile, but most of them do, especially in Florida. And you would expect some of them to end up being mentally deranged, not least because of the trauma that they went through with Epstein. And the nation has a long, long, long history of mentally deranged men and women making very weird allegations of sex abuse and from celebrities and world political leaders for whatever delusional reason. In law school, I learned about a case uh, suing Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton and Dick Cheney as part of a conspiracy to enslave millions of black women and create breeding camps to breed more black women to act as sex slaves and hunting victims. And that case got thrown out of court. But in the Me Too era, somebody can make these wildly implausible allegations that aren't even consistent with what other victims are saying, and they get a Netflix documentary about them, and they're treated seriously by the press because nobody is willing to say sometimes women make things up. There are absolutely victims here. Maxwell was justly convicted of trafficking women to Epstein himself, but there wasn't anything beyond this particular millionaire's weird, perverted fetish. And yes, he liked collecting celebrities and mingled and networked with a lot of them. And yes, he got his money by very weird mechanisms that seem sketchy, and probably was committing financial crimes long before he was working for Les Wexner. But uh, these themes all seem to be just generally unrelated.
Yeah. So there are kind of two pieces of evidence that, in my mind, weigh most strongly against a conspiracy type view. And one of them is what you were talking about the the lack of victim lawsuits or the limited nature of the victim lawsuits. We don't know who most of the victims are. They're anonymous for understandable reasons. There was, I guess, the one of the few people that we do know is Virginia Guthrie, who is the one who made a number of allegations against Alan Dershowitz, Bill Richardson, I think, Minsky, and of course Prince Andrew, who is the one who settled with. Prince Andrew settled with her. I don't know if anybody else did. Most of them, most of the cases, I think, got dismissed that she brought against uh, third parties. So I think, I mean, that's a reasonable question. Is, well, why would there not be more people who would do that if it is the case that Epstein was pimping out these girls to other prominent rich people. I mean, I guess you could say,
And
like,
it's the Me Too era too, when
yeah,
this really took off, right? It's
yeah,
that 2017 to 19 stretch where this came to the forefront, and it's the Me Too era, and Bill Cosby's first accuser comes forward, and dozens more come forward, and you saw that pattern repeated time after time after time, and you had all these victims of Epstein. Um, and with millions of dollars at stake, all Guthrie needed was two or three or four other victims to come forward and say the same thing, and none of them would do that, and it's just remarkable.
yeah. I mean, I would say, like, it is the case that her, with the exception of Prince Philip, I mean, Prince Andrew.
Andrew,
I
I
shouldn't.
make that mistake all the time
Yes,
too,
right.
but
Yeah, Prince Andrew. Um, Prince Philip, I think would have been in his 90s, maybe at the time. I'm not sure, but like her lawsuits didn't actually um, go anywhere. Um, so I suppose you could argue that
now Andrew settled, but
yes,
let's look at the context of that,
right,
which is first he gives this really horrific interview to the BBC where he just
yeah,
looks fundamentally dishonest and looks shady and is probably doing other unseemly things with Jeffrey Epstein, whether or not he's sleeping with Guthrie. He's probably, he's getting foot massages from Russian models at a minimum. And
yeah,
it's hard to imagine that as a single man, he wasn't horn dogging with 20-year-old models or whatever, things that would look bad. And you have a royal family with billions of dollars at stake, but a politically precarious situation where they're always one big scandal away from being abolished. Um, and I suspect could still be abolished in my lifetime if uh, they seem to be tolerating Charles just fine. It didn't. There was a lot of talk about having him abdicate to his sons. Uh, and the older son seems to be fairly popular. So maybe not in my lifetime, especially as short as it's going to be. But uh, the they were facing some existential risk from this lawsuit, far more than Andrew's own personal wealth or whatever. And if I'm and given who the jury would be in New York City, and given how Andrew would perform in front of that jury, if I'm the royal family, I'm a lawyer for the royal family, I'm advising them make this go away. You do not want Andrew in the headlines for the length of a 3 or 4 month trial uh, in a he said she said case. And that's what happened, and the timing is exactly when I would have had it happen, which is after that BBC interview when his credibility went way downhill.
yeah,
But before that, she didn't have any corroborating evidence. Her corroborating evidence was a witness who said, "I saw uh, Andrew get a foot massage from of-age models, and another woman who said that when she was 21, Andrew took a photo that mimicked the Rolling Stone Janet Jackson photo where he puts his hands on her breasts. And none of that rises to he raped a 17-year-old. So or paid to rape a 17-year-old. And the evidence was always kind of questionable, especially given who else uh, Goffrey had accused and how implausible those accusations were, and how she had to, confess that she sued Dershowitz in a case of mistaken identity. And like,
Hard to think who might have been mistaken for Alan Dershowitz. He seems a pretty
yeah,
distinctive.
maybe Ron Silver was there. I don't know.
Yeah, right, right.
Uh, so uh, it, it, but the fact that that money was paid sort of gave some credence to her as her larger allegations,
Right.
which were very sensational, and she was the only victim coming forward. And so you have that. You have some sensationalistic reporting during the Bush administration about possible intelligence ties that is very thinly sourced and
Yeah,
sort of by deduction is a Steve Bannon leak that
right. I mean,
isn't very plausible.
I'll say, the case uh, for so I would say the case of Jeffrey Epstein having some sort of connections to the intelligence community of this or another country. It's circumstantial. There's a lot of pieces that individually you could maybe um, dismiss or say are not that likely. I mean, cumulatively, it does seem to be that uh, he was hanging around with a lot of, intelligence adjacent people, whether it's Donald Barr, the head of the Dalton School, who may or may not have hired him. It's not clear, right? He did retire before, like right
Started
before, yeah, he started. But uh,
Khashoggi.
Shogi, right? Maxwell's father, of course. There's all
Well,
sorts of
Maxwell was dead before he met Maxwell. So
yes,
Robert
right, yeah,
Maxwell was dead before he met the
right,
daughter.
yes, that's right, yeah. Um, and there is, uh, I tried to look, because as I think you alluded to, there's a story um, in the Daily Beast that the prosecutor, the federal prosecutor of the original Epstein case, who um, criticized for giving him a very lenient, plea deal slash immunity deal. Supposedly, when he was also labor secretary under Trump one, and supposedly when he was, uh, being interviewed for them, I think for possible attorney general spot.
Right. That's the Daily Beast story.
Yes, right,
That is
and
probably been insourced.
probably Bannon, yeah, and
Um,
that's pretty weak by itself. I would say. Now, I did Acosta. He was asked about it. I have a clip here. I'm going to try and play this. So he was asked about it at a press conference, whether he actually said this, and his response. This is his response.
Richard Lardner from the Associated Press. Secretary, were you ever made aware at any point your handling of this case if Mr. Epstein was an intelligence asset of some sort?
Um, so so there has been reporting to that effect, and let me say, there's been reporting to a lot of effects in this case, not just now but over the years, and again, I would I would hesitate to take this reporting as fact. This was a case that was brought by our office. It was brought based on the facts, and I look at that reporting and others, I can't address it directly because of our guidelines. But I can tell you that a lot of reporting is just going down rabbit holes. A few more questions. A few more questions. Have you asked a question yet?
All right. So now, to me, as a former lawyer, like that seems very fishy. You know, that's what we would call in the business like a non-denial denial. And I've heard people have told me that he later was like uh, gave a more firm denial, but I've tried like finding what his exact words were, and search engines have gotten really bad. By the way, I mean they're almost
Yes, I would look at the OIG report. I still need to do that to see what exactly they said about it, but
yeah,
my understanding is he did not use that as a defense in the Office of Inspector General report,
yeah,
and,
yeah,
his legal career is at risk there. If
right,
there's a time to say, "I made this decision because I was ordered to by my higher ups," that's the time to do it,
right,
and that he was willing to stand on the actual reasoning, and it's not crazy reasoning to say, "Look, this guy was very well appointed in lawyers and had made a plausible case that they're gonna fight the Commerce Clause aspect of this to the Supreme Court. It was gonna take a lot of resources. It was the pre-Me Too era, so all of our victim witnesses had brought civil litigation and could be discredited on those grounds. Many of them had recruited their friends to participate and could be discredited on those grounds. Um, and the sentencing guidelines for what the grand jury returned wasn't even going to provide prison time. So rather than, and I'm in the Southern District of Florida, which has all of these drug crimes, which has all of these immigration crimes, and to devote all of my office's resources to fighting Alan Dershowitz and Ken Starr and Kirkland and Ellis. And here's my disclosure here. I worked at Kirkland and Ellis, and I even worked 2 doors, 3 doors down from Alex Acosta at Kirkland and Ellis. I've
Are you the one that
never
told
talked to
him
Alex
that?
about this case. What?
Are you the one that told him that Epstein was with intelligence? Is that
I have never talked to Alex about this case, and I don't think I even ever talked to him while he was U.S. attorney, um, or Secretary of Labor for that matter. He was a busy guy, um, or when he was on the NLRB. But uh, it's very reasonable to say, oh, we have this agreement that he's going to plead guilty to the state charges. The state will punish him. The state will give him sex offender status, and he will get prison time, and that's a good day. Um, and that's not the decision a prosecutor would make in 2018, but it's not a crazy decision for a federal prosecutor with federal prosecutorial resources in 2008. And that's enough to explain it without having to go into intelligence or Bush administration cover up or Mossad or anything like that. And I think there's an investigation to be had on what Epstein did to manipulate state officials to let him get away with such a light sentence in Florida. And if you put a gun to Alex Acosta's head, I'd imagine he would say, "I was surprised at how light the Florida state punishment was." Um, but uh, I think that that's an entirely separate issue, and you don't need an intelligence hypothesis to explain that.
yeah? All right. Before we move to Epstein's assassination, Razib, is there? Do you want to weigh in on any of this, or?
Yeah, I got what I would say is like, just like reading. So, TED stuff. Also, Michael Tracy has been writing about it a lot. Compact. You know, um, One thing that I have observed, and I remember talking about this before the pandemic. I remember like, well, yeah, I don't want to say who. It was someone who actually worked for Dershowitz at one point. But anyway, uh, asking about so we know a lot about Epstein's like sexual perversions, which okay, that kind of makes sense because it's salacious, it makes good copy. And people have been obsessed with the idea of pedophile rings for I don't know, well, I mean, since Alex Jones became big 25 years ago, I would say. So there's kind of like a template there. Um, what I have always found perplexing, and as I said, I remember this, like, I'm thinking this before the pandemic because it was at my like at a previous office, and I just remember thinking, like I have a subscription to the Wall Street Journal, and I'm like reading about how he's a pervert and he has a sex island, and I just was wondering, like, okay, but like I want to know more about how he made his money, like how he got his connections, and all this stuff, and I feel like, when, so for example, Naftali Bennett says Epstein does not work for the Mossad. Well, I mean, what would he say? But still, I think like there's a fair amount of points that people were making to someone who doesn't know these things, which I don't, and I don't think deeply about them. Okay, yeah, it probably was not working for the Mossad. Maybe Ghislaine Maxwell's dad was working for the Mossad. There's like all sorts of like stuff around that. But he's obviously tight with Ehud Barak, and knows a lot of people in Israel, which okay, that's not that big of a deal. I just want to know, I want to know the forensic audit of this dead like guy who liked to like show off his wealth and take people along on his plane, and like okay, I'm not gonna say who this is, obviously, but I do have one Epstein story, not me myself, obviously, but it was back in the 1980s, and it was a young woman, and anyway, she was familiar with Jeffrey Epstein, and he invited her to Europe on his jet with his friends, and then one of her friends was like, you're gonna have to have sex with all his friends. And she was like, "No, no, no. He's like super nice guy, actually. Like, you got the wrong impression about him, you know." And she's like complaining to Jeffrey Epstein. She's complaining. She's like, "Jeffrey, it's like my friend was just saying, like, on the trip that I'm gonna have to like have sex with all your friends as we're going over the Atlantic and stuff like that." And he's like, "Yeah, so I was like, I mean, he was like, he was like a pervert, That's totally true. And like those are like funny stories and they're salacious and you can like spin them. But like with the Les Wexner relationship and these other relationships, I just want to know like how he could maintain these over all the years, in particular with his peccadillos. And I don't know like much about this guy, but I have friends who've met him, like scientists. Like he liked to collect scientists too, in addition to rich people and philanthropists. And what people routinely say about him is like it's not like he was a incredibly charming, incisive thinker. Like one on one, he was actually quite pedestrian. Probably he did fancy himself some thinker, but um,
No,
you know,
he would invite all these scientists down to the ranch for dinner parties and then lecture him with some crazy autodidact theory that everybody would politely nod to because,
yeah.
you're paying the piper.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I mean, I want to know what I guess like my issue is there's nothing to see here. Move on. I mean, I can accept that for the sexual blackmail hypothesis on the island, and all that stuff. Um, I
But
just
where did
think
he make
that
his money?
well, if you
Yeah.
want me to be honest,
So
like I suspect that there are like really rich people who don't want people to know the details of how they're dodging taxes, how they're moving money around from various accounts, and like that's not as salacious to the regular Joe Blow public, but it's probably not optimal for very wealthy individuals that are avoiding taxation from the governments in which they, where they live and things like that. So I think there's more of a Panama Papers aspect to this
sure.
that I think is being like kind of avoided. Okay, that's what I believe.
All right. So with Les Wexner, well, even before that, he's got like between Bear Stearns, where he's kicked out for what seems to be SEC violations, um, but had done well for himself at Bear Stearns. Whether he's a millionaire where when he leaves or not, I don't know. But he's got 10 years of just things that seem shady. Like he's dealing with Khashoggi. He's working for several years for Towers, which turns out to be a Ponzi scheme. And the head of Towers says that Epstein was involved in that, though Epstein was never charged in that. So he's making money in doing financial stuff, but it seems kind of shady. I will acknowledge. And then he hooks up with Les Wexner, and whether he was just good at procuring models for Les Wexner, or Les Wexner was good at procuring models for him, or they were just horn dogging together. For whatever reason, Les Wexner loves this guy and comes to completely rely upon him and signs over like all authority, gives him power of attorney. And Epstein seems to take maximal advantage of this, and he ends up with his townhouse. He ends up with tens of millions of dollars, and and it's not just tax strategy. He's running the family office, and making sure that private planes are going to the right places, and hiring and firing staff, and cutting off Wexner from his friends. And this is a several-year relationship, and that's where Epstein seems to make the bulk of his money, or the first chunk that makes him rich enough to fly your friend to Europe, hypothetically. And we know from it's believable that he's having group sex with models or whatever, but there isn't yet the hint of pedophilia. And we know that there's allegations of sexual harassment of Victoria's Secret models while he's working with Wexler. But Wexner apparently just wildly overpays him. And Wexner himself complains, I was overcharged $46 million by Epstein, on top of whatever Epstein would have reasonably charged a billionaire to be managing the family office and running the financial affairs and all of that. And again, the fact that he's complaining about being overcharged publicly is either a very good psyop to cover up the actual blackmail, but it seems very inconsistent with blackmail versus giving him a sinecure to keep paying him. And we, after Wexner, we're now in the biggest bull market in American history. And Epstein's wealth can be entirely explained with slightly above average investing of what he got from Wexner and whatever he earned before that. It's that very easily grows to the hundreds of millions he ended up with, especially given that he's investing in real estate, that he's still getting payments from other billionaires for wealth management. And he's probably exaggerating the scope of his money management business. He's very good at self-promotional. We know he lies like mad. And he's got incentives to lie like mad because he doesn't have a great resume. But being an international man of mystery is attractive. Claiming to have a large stable of clients is attractive, and having the trappings of celebrity and wealth is attractive, and claiming to be close to Bill Clinton, and that serves the purpose of getting fresh new money coming into his investing, but it also serves to intimidate his victims down the line. And so we have that lying and that exaggeration. But between the $46 million that Wexner overpaid him, plus whatever Wexner reasonably paid him, and then we have a very thorough accounting of the work he did for Leon Black through the Deschert report for Apollo, as Apollo is deciding what to do with the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. And they determined that Black pays Epstein $158 million, but Epstein figured out tax savings for Black of $1.3 billion. Now, whether these are legitimate tax savings, that's a good Panama Papers thing. What the heck is he doing that it makes a $1.3 billion difference in tax planning that Black's original accountants missed? But that's what we have there.
All right, so let's
Yeah.
talk. Oh, go ahead.
No. Just yeah. Let's like
Yeah,
talk about the assassination of
talk about
Jeffrey
the
Epstein.
death. So this is another area where
We're cutting it off. We're cutting it off. Okay.
what
I'm sorry?
Paid. We're getting paid,
paid.
the
Yeah,
paywall.
yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. Yes. We're in the paid section. All right. So now you can tell us what you really think about
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the
none of
real
this.
truth now.
That's
Instead of
right.
like
Yeah. Exactly.
yeah. That's
Um.
like
So
The
with his
most
death,
disturbing part of the tape is when he shouts, "Hillary, no!"
right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, disturbing but not surprising. Let's be frank. Uh. You could be Ted Frank, as a matter of fact. So with his death, I think it's similar to some of the other things in that you have a bunch of elements that individually, are perhaps explicable, but it's the combination together that kind of raises questions. So, Epstein, he's supposed to be on suicide watch. You're supposed to have a cellmate. They take his cellmate out. They don't replace it. You say, okay, that's just a goof up. Uh, the
Not just on suicide watch, but he had attempted suicide.
Right. Well, yes. Or he was. I mean, he was found, yeah, like with his neck injured, and I think there's some dispute about whether he had admitted or claimed that it was a suicide, or I think he may have said someone attacked him, whether that's true or not. But in any event, he was on suicide watch. They're supposed to have someone there. They didn't do that. The guards are supposed to check on him every 45 minutes, maybe something like that. They didn't do that, but you say, okay, what do you expect of lazy unionized prison guard? Things, they fell asleep. They didn't do the checks. The camera that is, showing the entrance to his cell is out, but
He isn't recording,
it's not
but a lot of
recording. Yeah,
cameras in that
a
prison
lot of
weren't
camera.
recording.
Yeah, right. The camera, um, in the earlier incident, the earlier suicide attempt or whatever it was, uh, the camera there for that cell, they said it wasn't recording, and then they found the tape, and then they said they accidentally erased the tape. So okay, maybe these are just, you could say this is all Keystone cop or Keystone prison guard type behavior. But it is striking that you have all these things in sequence, and not just for an ordinary Joe, schmo prisoner, but like for a very high profile prisoner who, arguably would either have a motive. Uh, Either there are people who would want him out of the way, or he might have wanted the opportunity to off himself, and have arranged with, I mean, I think it's like a possible scenario is he did kill himself, but he had assistance in the sense of like, someone outside got to the guards or did something to make sure that he would have the opportunity to do that, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know, like, what do you, obviously the GAO did a big report on this. They
They
concluded
punished the guards.
yeah, well, the guards, I think, went to prison, yeah, because they,
They falsified records,
lied. Right.
and
Yes.
surely they'd have the incentive to flip if
Well, I
uh,
mean, maybe. I mean, they would have an incentive, but who knows what the incentives on the other side would be hypothetically, right?
right. Well,
Um,
if your motive is I want to kill Jeffrey Epstein, I think the time to do it is before his inevitable arrest and
right. Yes.
imprisonment.
Yes.
Uh, right. I mean, it's a much more exciting heist movie to wait until he's actually in prison, and then you have to go and disable cameras and guards
Right.
and do it without, somehow subdue him so that there isn't a struggle. Um, so, and a team of Hillary's ninjas successfully doing that is obviously a very sexy story, but rationally, you want his plane to crash in the Atlantic Ocean, or have him have a mysterious accident in his Florida mansion or in the Virgin Islands. And, um,
Or you can't have every
whatever the heist strategy is, it's got to be easier when he's not in the MCC.
right.
Um, and you don't know which cameras are working, and you don't know which ones are not working, and you don't know who's monitoring the cameras. Right, because it wasn't that the cameras weren't working; it was that the recording wasn't being captured. The cameras were there,
Yes.
and
Right. Yeah, you would
the
have to
they
know.
had a live feed, and no, the live feed wasn't being recorded.
Right.
Um, so people commit suicide in prison, and it happens all the time. Uh, Even though they're on suicide watch, because it's just boring looking at prisoners uh, and doing the rounds at 2 a.m. and things like that. And it's hard to find good help to do that. And you don't want to, as a society, we don't want the brain surgeons trying to prevent suicide in prison. So the people who are hired to do that are not going to be your best and brightest. And it's a tough job. Um, so I just think the simplest explanation is the most likely. You had a completely amoral religious person who is used to a life of luxury and is now in a very unpleasant situation, facing humiliation, and uh, uh, is not going to get conjugal visits, and is looking at solitary confinement or protective custody for the rest of his life, which is also very unpleasant. But the alternative is also going to be unpleasant, because you're not well treated in prison if you have a reputation as a child molester. And just suicide does not seem like a surprising outcome in that scenario. He was not going to see freedom again.
I will say, I'm not, and so I am not naive that, in thinking that you could avoid conspiracy theorizing about Epstein by being more transparent or thorough in some of these investigations and releases and so on and so forth. But uh, I will say, like, particularly, um, given a number of comments that uh, some of the principals involved here have made about Epstein before they took their current
And that's the
position.
problem that they have now,
Yes,
because you had Patel and Bongino,
right.
and to a lesser extent Trump, though, Trump's allegations, he's never arrested Ted Cruz's father for the JFK murder either. So, uh, I don't think he's covering up that. But,
That
Trump just says things.
yes,
And one of the reasons I don't think Trump is involved is because,
he
you
would blurt
know,
it out.
if you could be implicated by Epstein, why do you raise it on the campaign trail in 2016 when you're only going to call attention to it?
Right.
Why do you hire Alex Acosta for your cabinet, which can only call attention to it? Why do you make it a campaign promise and open up the files in January when you're going to have to clamp down on it somehow to cover up your own sins? Why don't you shut it down earlier? And so that's, I think, sort of explains why I don't think Trump is involved. In the case of Patel and Bongino, they when you go with government by podcaster, eh, I mean, I think we're very fortunate that they're being surprisingly, I don't know, surprisingly, but they're being ethical, right? How easy would it be to just sort of create 4 or 5 wealthy scapegoats and say, these people were accused by Goffrey, and we're going to prosecute them unless they agree to a plea. And they didn't do that either, uh, because they, I think, recognize they don't have real credible evidence, and they would have to turn over to the defense attorneys the fact that they don't have real credible evidence and all of the things that sort of indicate that Joffrey was a fabulist. Um, but Patel and Bongino, and to a lesser extent Bondi, can't go to the press and give the Ted Frank explanation of why Acosta was reasonable in giving the plea agreement, and why there was never a client list, and why it would be implausible for there to be a client list, and why it would be implausible for there to be a blackmailing operation. And all they can do is sweep it under the rug.
Yeah.
Matt Iglesias made the very reasonable point. Yeah, it's reasonable to say there was never anything there, but then you need to explain why you were saying things to the contrary for the last 3 or 4 years to criticize the Democrats. And it's not like the Democrats currently have clean hands because they're all now accusing Trump of a cover up.
Right. Yes. That
And I don't know, maybe this is the issue Tucker Carlson runs on in 2028. I'm going to get to the bottom of this.
or Elon Musk.
I will do what Trump
Party.
wouldn't do because he was protecting the Jews. But the right one of my favorite jokes, I think, comes into play here. A man dies and goes to heaven, and God approaches him and says, you get to ask one question. And the man says, who killed JFK? And God says, well, it was Lee Harvey Oswald. He acted alone. And the man says, my God, this goes deeper than I thought.
That's right. Go
And
straight to the top.
and you have these non-falsifiable theories that you have this all-powerful cabal that can go in with ninjas and kill Epstein without leaving a trace, and can clean things up, and can silence Trump and his associates and force them to embarrass themselves to cover up the conspiracy. And there's just no, once you have that world viewpoint, there's just nothing you can do. If Pam Bondi said she had the client list on her desks, she must have been telling the truth then and been forced to shut up by the Mossad. And it can't possibly be that she misspoke and was just talking about the files in general, or got confused between the idea of a client list and a black book. And you're just going to have people who are always going to be dissatisfied. And it's just the first time in our history that they're getting encouraged by CNN and Netflix at the same time that they encompass a not insubstantial portion of the population. Right? What was the poll? 19% think that there's a cabal of pedophiles controlling things.
That low.
We could well have a full-fledged Q president next term.
Right. I mean,
And I couldn't even tell you whether it's going to be a Democratic Q or a Republican Q.
yeah. I mean, I think in terms of like the assassination, the pedophiles, like all this, what these political influencers were doing. I think it's that book Revolt of the Masses, which was kind of praised actually about why Trump and these populists are rising, the new communication technologies and all that. Unfortunately, and it's beyond the paywall, so I can just say this: like most people are retarded, and so, I whatever issues you think, and I know some of the listeners and viewers are going to be like, "Oh, like these guys are so credulous," and Ted Frank is like working for Mossad or whatever. But the reality is, like, I think most people can't agree. Most people are stupid. They believe in astrology. All these other like weird, kooky things that make sense to them, and a pedophile conspiracy or whatever conspiracy. I mean, look, if you're gonna get on a podcast, like, that's how you get the subs. That's how you goose the subs. Because, like, there's been a proven track record of that selling since before, the protocols of the Elders of Zion. I mean,
Right.
people are key to believe in these sorts of conspiracies. You add some sex, you add some murder, some subterfuge, assassinations. I mean, this is like good content, as they say. This is meme worthy. Unfortunately, it's quite likely that's all crap, but that doesn't really matter when you're cashing the checks. Okay, that
Right.
doesn't make any sense to the younger listeners. But that doesn't really matter when you're clearing the Venmos or whatever it is. It's like when it comes to like the free market of ideas, these ideas sell. And I think we just need to come and confront it as a culture. I don't know what we're gonna do with it. Maybe we're just like kind of throw up our hands and be just like everything's fake. Let's just go. Let's just go for it. Or maybe we need to like reflect a little bit in terms of what we're rewarding. I mean, me and Josiah have done podcasts for like what, like almost a decade now. Not quite, but almost. And I
Well,
think
we don't
mhm,
have an educational system
yeah,
that teaches the right level of skepticism
yeah.
because 'cause we're not even teaching how to read.
I mean, look at Maha. No shade on like people want to get healthy, but like the anti-vax stuff. Like these dyes, these there are chemicals in your food.
No,
You know,
absolutely, and, I wouldn't dare use the R word, but, uh, that's just an unspeakable slur,
yeah.
but
I mean, look, Frank. Do you know, Ted? Do you know Ted? Frank? Do you know that like some of these processed foods are made out of chemicals?
I
They're made out of chemicals. You
it's
know,
true,
like if you look at the labels, you
there are
see
people
the
who die
you
of, uh,
yeah. That's what I'm trying to say. You see chemicals. You see like these chemical
dihydrogen,
formulas on the
monoxide,
label. So.
all the time.
But this
CHMO
is
kills you.
this is the world that we live in, unfortunately, and to some extent, it could be an issue where I don't know, the gatekeepers, the elite need to come back, and I don't know. I mean, it used
So
to work back in
are
the
we
day.
gonna lose to a society of gatekeepers, or is our Hayekian advantage, gonna
Yeah.
help us beat China?
I think
Um,
Go yeah. I mean, I'll just say I do think, people underestimate the extent to which, uh, wild conspiracy theories have been a part of American life going back
no, that
to the beginning.
it's been very true for a long time, and there's just always been gatekeepers to keep them out.
Yeah,
But, the none dare call it treason,
right.
uh, in the
I mean, Th
'50s
Thomas
and
Thomas
Henry
Jefferson
Ford
believed
before that, and it's been there. There's always been that strain, and Ross Perot got 19% of the vote with it.
right.
And 19% I think is a good accurate number of the hardcore conspiracists. Um, but we have these weird polarized times where Trump is being reasonable about Epstein, and that means the Democrats have to be unreasonable at Epstein because they can't possibly agree with Trump, especially when they can hit him over the head with it and make the same sort of slurs that Trump made about Clinton. And maybe there's some poetic justice there that if he gets hoist by his own petard on that. But uh, I mean, it's weird that of all the things Trump has lied about, that this is the one he can't wave his hands and make go away, where he's actually telling the truth this time.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Well, I mean, you're talking about Democrats, obviously focusing mostly on Republicans around Trump's in power and Bongino, and this conspiracy, this like Epstein conspiracy theory world is more on the right, although there are people on the left, tend to be on the far left, and I think we're talking about
I don't think
conspiracy
it's the far
theories.
left anymore. We have
Yeah, yeah. Well,
people in the
but that's
Democratic
very
side of the Senate and
yeah,
House saying we need to have investigations on how Trump covered this up.
yeah, yeah. But I mean,
We have Jake
that's
Tapper
very
saying that.
but that's very like
This is not
opportunistic. I
fringe.
feel, but I would say that's very opportunistic. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, of
Like
course it's
you know,
opportunistic
because when you're saying because like
and might even be
normally.
cynical.
Because normally
Um,
when Trump says jump, MAGA jumps. But in this case, they're like, oh hell no. I mean, this cuts close to deeply held beliefs of a lot of people about the cabals running like starting with QAnon type stuff. So
and you have people being opportunistic on the right too, right? You have Tucker uh, like trying to blame this on the Jews and then using it to attack people like Bill Ackman who have absolutely no connection with Epstein whatsoever. Um,
I kind of want to do a Tucker impersonation, but I'm not very good at it. But like this is where Tucker would laugh and say, "I didn't say Jews. I said Israel." you know, like Tucker. You don't think he's got? I don't know. I find him entertaining, so I'm not even hating on him.
no,
I just know what he would respond.
I'm disappointed at that this is the direction he's gone.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I will say, and I think
when he was promoting Chris Rufo, he was a good force. He was a force for good, and now he's
right. Well,
generally a bad person. But
if not if not the Mossad, you are definitely working for the aliens, perhaps. But
the lizards.
yeah, I will say, I think it's probably whatever you think about the Epstein stuff, I think it's probably fair to say, if you're a listener, you understand why Ted Frank gets paid the big bucks for oral advocacy. He's a very effective, advocate for his point of view, whether it is, reasonableness in class action settlements or the justness of the death penalty in particular instances, or anti-conspiracy mongering. You are
Well,
out there.
there are absolutely conspiracies out there. There's a conspiracy to make the Central Park Five seem innocent, and I'm very frustrated by that. But
Right. Yes. Yes. So, I think. Do you have anything else before we close out, Razib? All right. Well, thanks. Thanks again. Anyone?
My handlers told me that I got nothing more to say.
All right. Well, yeah. Hamilton Lincoln, great organization. Ted Frank, great follow on X, and
and this was a lot of fun. Have me back.
yes. We'll have you back at some point. Assuming you don't.
The ratings aren't too bad, and
Assuming you're allowed to.
yeah, exactly.
Assuming you don't learn of information that could lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton, in which case, rest in peace.
Two minds met on a summer's eve, each with truths they long believed. Words flowed like a winding stream as hours passed in deep debate. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. In listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. And after all was said and done, They found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. It's not about who's wrong or right, but understanding others' light. In civil discourse we can find ties that gently bind. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. As dawn broke soft on dewy grass, they smiled and shook hands at last. Two souls enriched by reason talk, united in respect. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. This folk song captures the essence of a long, thoughtful discussion between two public intellectuals. It emphasizes the power of patient listening, mutual respect, and the discovery of common ground. The gentle tone reflects the common understanding they reach after their debate. Would you like me to expand on any aspects of the lyrics or discuss the